Welcome to the show, Eitan. Thanks for your time. I know you're very busy. You're working, as a citizen of Israel, and you also find time to participate in the protests. So, give us an idea of what is it like. You said you're just a citizen. You have your own agency. You run your agency, a private entity, but you're in the eye of the storm. But from my observation, as a news anchor, as a news analyst of international news, we see lots of elections in the past, which is not quite common when we hear stories from Israel. And, you know, Netanyahu, or you call him Bibi, has been re-elected. And now it seems like, and this is my own personal observation, that you use the word power grab. But my question to you is Israel on the verge of becoming a state of a dictatorship?
Well, I'm glad that you said, I'm a citizen. I'm not a political analyst. And you're right. I am in the eye of the storm. I live in Tel Aviv, and I live very close to where you've been seeing these demonstrations, which are making, the homepage of CNN right now. I don't think that it will become a dictatorship, and I don't think that it will become a dictatorship because there's an overwhelming part of the population that are against what Netanyahu is trying to do. And again, this is my opinion. Netanyahu was elected fair and square. There's no disputing that. He won an election a few months ago. I've never personally voted for him, but he won. And he formed a coalition after many democratic elections where it was, in the past few years, it was very difficult to form a coalition. The last government was a left-wing government, and the government fell apart. And then Netanyahu came in and he won the election. He put together a coalition by a narrow margin, but he put together a coalition absolutely legitimately. But what he really has been trying to do is change some of the rules. It's almost like a kid playing a game. You have rules of a game. Let's say there's a football game. There's two teams, 11 players. There's two goals and there's one ball. So it's almost like what he's trying to do with his coalition, which is a very extreme right government, the most extreme right government that there has been, I think, in the history of Israel. It's almost like they're trying to change the rules of the game. So instead of one ball, there's going to be three balls. Instead of two goals, there's going to be four goals. Instead of 11 players each, there's going to be 20 players each. You can't change the rules of the game. How does this actually come into play? The biggest issue and what the reason that the demonstrations are all about is because he and his coalition are trying to change the power of the Supreme Court, and saying, well, we're a democratically elected government, we can do what we want. Now, of course, as a government, you can come in and you can change rules. People do it all the time and they're in power. But they're kind of changing the rules of the game. They're trying to change the system. And they are the majority. They did win. But we live in a democratic society. And when you're a democracy, and you win, it doesn't mean that the majority, the winners, can do whatever they want. That's why you have a Supreme Court. You have checks and balances. And what they're trying to do, and they're very open about it, they're saying that the Supreme Court has too much power, and they're trying to weaken the Supreme Court. When you have a government and a Supreme Court that is weak and cannot contest decisions that a government make, you can very easily start trampling on citizens' rights, and you can also change the rules of the game in your favor. Now, that doesn't mean that reform to the judicial system is not necessary. But what Netanyahu has done is he's done it very, very quickly, trying to push legislation through, very extreme. The people who are in his government, a lot of people don't trust them because they have an agenda. They're very right-wing, they're very extreme. And the people started rising up. And to answer, this is a long answer to your question, but the short answer is I don't think that there will be a dictatorship because of not just people like me and my wife who are on the streets, including our children demonstrating, but hundreds of thousands of people are gathering on a weekly basis to demonstrate against him. And it started out small and it got to the point where there are hundreds of thousands of people a few days ago. Sometimes the demonstrations are planned. The other day when he fired the defense minister for saying, look, the the judicial overhaul might be necessary, but it has to stop because it's creating a rift in our society that's penetrating our army, our air force, our security forces, and that is dangerous. We must slow it down. Netanyahu fired him. He fired him, the defense minister of his own government, for speaking the truth to the people. On that day, hundreds of thousands came out spontaneously. So as long as the public continues to demonstrate and show that they are not happy with not only the fact that maybe this is happening, but the speed at which this is happening and why they are doing this and how they are doing this, as long as we keep that momentum up, I don't think that there will be a dictatorship. But it is not easy, and the country is split. There's also the other side, which are for the judicial reforms. So I'm sorry it's a long answer, but it's very difficult to make it concise.
Totally fine. What could be his ulterior motives of doing this very fast and doing it in such a manner?
Well, look, the common narrative is that Bibi is facing corruption charges, and so a lot of those on the left and the extreme left are saying, look, he's trying to change the laws in his favor so that he can avoid a potential prison sentence. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a political analyst, but on the very human level, I'm not a Bibi Netanyahu hater. I don't like it when people hate on people. There's also a lot of people hating on his wife, hating on his son. Look, I'm not a fan of any of them, but I'm not a hater. But you can see by his actions that he is not uniting the country. He is very actively dividing the country. And I think that a true leader, someone who is for the people, even when he has an agenda or she has an agenda, when you see such a rift, such a polarization in the country, where there's a real threat to the stability of the country, to the security of the country, especially Israel. We're not surrounded by people who love us, especially. I think that when you don't unite, then you either are just going for your agenda or you're power hungry. He's very, very power hungry. And I think that my personal opinion is that power has jaded him. It has made him blind. And you see that by what he says, because when you have speeches to the nation, which he's made a couple of times in the last week and a half in the context of what's going on, he doesn't bring us together. He kind of brings a lot of negativity into the rhetoric. He talks us and them, and it's very, very smart what he's doing as a politician. He's a master politician. He's speaking to his base, just like Trump did. Why was Trump so successful at the time? He spoke to his base. So I think that he is very... I don't think that he can imagine what it's like not being in power. And I think that losing the election and not being in power for a year really changed him. So I think he's after the power. And I think that he's become empty. And it's very sad because he did a lot for Israel in the past. But he's harming Israel now. He's not the heart of Israel like he should be.
We hear this all the time, power corrupt. When you're in power, it kind of goes to the head. And Trump and Netanyahu are best friends too, from what we observe, and we see this kind of behavior in our politicians in our country as well, Eitan. So, and you have protests now, and I hope that it will not turn violence. But what would be the solution then for a common Israelis, which is sharing the global trend of living in a very divided society, ideologically, philosophically, and also
Well, I think that when it takes a certain type of person, whether it's in your family, whether it's in the workplace, that when there is division between kids or employees, to bring people together and to hear and to listen. And I think that this situation has shown that judicial reform is necessary, but how extreme it is and how you go about it, it should be a dialogue. There's no trust right now between the left and the right. What we need right now in Israel are leaders And by the way, I'm not just talking about Netanyahu. I think that the left in the country is pretty non-existent right now, and they failed catastrophically in the elections. But the center right, the center left must create the conditions for dialogue, for hearing each other, for slowing things down, and for rebuilding trust. That is the only way that we will get out of this crisis. And I agree with you. I really hope that things don't get violent, because people are used to seeing the conflict between the Palestinians, the Israelis, and in the past between Arab nations and Israel. But if you go back to thousands of years, there was conflict between the Jewish people as well, between the secular and the more religious. And that really is the underlying tension, I think, with this entire crisis. And it's time that we figured that out. And it's going to take a long, long, long time. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think that it's going to get a little bit ugly. But hopefully, we'll find leadership of moderates who can bring people together to hear each other and to progress slowly without harming the democratic nature of our country. We're not going to change that, I hope.
We hope to. But do we have any charismatic leaders or figures who are capable of doing what you just mentioned or suggested?
I think that there are, the problem is that there is polarization. Bibi is seen as, they call him King Bibi, by the right. That they're diehard, he can do no wrong, which is terrible. On the extreme left, you have also leaders who are, that they have a more extreme left agenda. But the problem is that the other side don't trust each other when there are people at the extremes. I think that if Netanyahu wasn't so distrustworthy and didn't have such an agenda of really not telling the truth, then in terms of his track record, there might be hope that he would because he's very smart, the ability to bring people together, but he's shown that he's not capable. The other side doesn't trust him right now. So right now, there are a few politicians that, while not charismatic, might be able to bridge the gap through dialogue. There's one gentleman called Benny Gantz who is on the center, more center. He's not the most charismatic man, but he's seen as someone with integrity. You have other people like Yair Lapid and Merav Michaeli. These are people that are center and also on the left. But the problem is that the other side doesn't trust them. We need to have people that the other side can trust. And that's the problem. That's a challenge right now. The most important thing is not figuring out the judicial reforms right now at all. The most important thing right now is to build trust, to have dialogue, to take things slowly, and for each side to calm down. The problem is, you tell someone who wants to preserve our democracy the way that we've known it to calm down, they're like, no, we're going to fight, like me. You tell people on the other side who are saying, hey, we're going to make these reforms because it's about time that we did, and they have a point, and we're not going to stop because they believe in it. That's also hard. So people on each side need to talk to their people to calm down. It's very, very complicated. And in the meantime, you have the Hezbollah in the north threatening us. You have the Palestinian entity right now. There's Ramadan. Iran and Saudi Arabia have just, talking about a partnership and mending the rift between them. And there's a new nuclear threat from Iran as well.
Yeah,
it's very, very complicated, Varin. Very.
Yeah, they were already.
These are difficult days.
There were already analysis on, how, because Israel has been projecting the image of being the defender. So now you are, getting weaker on the inside because you cannot get along. And listening to you, it seems like, is it a dead end? I mean, are you hopeful that you will be able to come to a solution?
I am. I'll tell you two things that I want to say that's important for me, for your viewers to hear about Israel. One is, Israel is a country that is a democracy. I don't think that we're going to stop being a democracy, because I think that we're showing, when you see that there are so many people in the streets fighting for this in a way that I don't think that you saw in America. It's almost like the Egyptian Spring, you know. This is not something that is been driven by the left. This is not something that has been driven by foreign donations. This is really a grassroots movement, and it's in our blood to be democratic. And I think that when you have and you see and you feel this power of we the people, it gives you hope. So while this has been and it still is a traumatizing experience, and it's bringing out something that's very, very scary in Israel, at the same time, you're like, wow, look at all these people coming out. We're really there. We really believe in this thing. And that gives us hope. And I hope that that will bleed into good negotiations and good faith. And the other thing that I wanted to say is something that, as someone who advocates for Israel and for the Jewish people, something that I try to do from a very heartfelt place, a lot of our enemies or critics are always talking about how, you know, we don't allow for the Israelis and Jewish people don't allow for criticism of Israel. And I would challenge these people to look at what's going on in Israel right now and to see how we, the people, are challenging our own government. So how Israelis and Jewish people abroad, as Netanyahu has been traveling these past few weeks, are going to demonstrations against Netanyahu and challenging his leadership. And these are not people on the extreme left. These are many people on the left, people in the center, and also people on the right. You can criticize Israel. It's legitimate to criticize Israel. It really is, but not only criticizing Israel as a lot of news organizations and people and anti-Semitic people do. And they say it's not okay to criticize Israel. This is, I think, a masterclass in showing the world how you can rise up and democratically, in a democracy, speak up against your own nation. And I think that people need to see that as well. I'm very, very proud to be an Israeli because of how we are demonstrating against something that a lot of people don't believe in here.
Thank you very much for your time, Eitan, and we wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Varin. All my best and Sawadee Krap and Khop Kun Kap. I should have said that at the beginning. Thank you.
It's okay. ขอบคุณมากครับ
Khop Kun Krap.